This is On the Air with John Melley, a compelling interview program featuring today's innovative business leaders. Join us as we explore the creative solutions and unique products and services being developed for today's consumers and how businesses are thriving in today's complex marketplace. Now here's your host, John Melley.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the program. We have a fascinating guest today. My question is, what do pirates, oil rigs, and shipping containers all have in common? Well, they all fall under a category of legal practice called maritime law. And my guest today is Mr. Brian Beckcom, an attorney specializing in maritime law. Now, I've had a chance to speak with Brian before our interview today, and I assure you he's going to have some amazing stories to share with us. Let me tell you a little bit about our guest today. Mr. Beckcom is a sixth-generation Texan who grew up northwest of Fort Worth, and Brian is board certified in personal injury trial law by the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. Brian attended the University of Texas School of Law, and he graduated with honors and was selected to the Texas Law Review, where he was a member of the Legal Eagles. And during law school, Brian published a law review article that has since been cited by many legal commentators and authorities, as well as the Attorney General of the United States in a brief to the U.S. Supreme Court. Brian, I could take up a good portion of this program listing all the honors and accomplishments that you have, but let's dive in. How are you today?
I'm real good, John. Thanks a lot.
Sure. Welcome to the program. How did you get interested in the law, and then specifically maritime law? It sounds fascinating.
You know, it really is fascinating, John. When I originally decided to go to law school, I made that decision because even though there is no attorneys in my family, as far back as I can trace, my family was involved when I was a young child in a very serious legal matter involving my mother. My mother ended up passing away when I was 10 years old as a result of some very serious negligence.
Okay.
And so I got to see firsthand how that kind of event can really have a momentous impact on a family. We were involved in a case involving that negligence, and the lawyer that my family hired just did a terrific job in very difficult circumstances. So I kind of had in the back of my mind the idea that one day I would hopefully be in a position where I could represent families of people that had been killed by negligence or represent injured people whose lives had been changed, and that kind of drove me into law school.
Sure.
Now, when I got to law school, I had never even considered doing maritime law, but during my second year of law school, I had a law professor. His name was David Robertson. He's one of the most famous and well-known maritime law professors in the country, and I took a maritime class with him, and I just really enjoyed it. So after my second year of law school, I started thinking that might be a good area for me to practice. I ended up moving to Houston, which has one of the largest ports. I think it's the second largest port in the United States and one of the largest in the world. So there is a lot of maritime activity in Houston.
Sure.
And I began to meet a lot of maritime workers, and I really enjoyed meeting them and hearing what they did and representing them, because people that aren't involved in the industry, a lot of times they don't realize the sacrifice that maritime workers make for the good of their employers, for the good of their family. It is a tough, tough job, and it's a dangerous job. And unfortunately, some of the employers, not all of them, but some of the employers really mistreat their workers when they're hurt. So I started representing maritime workers and have been doing that kind of work, not exclusively, but almost exclusively for years now.
What was it about maritime law that really inspired you? What was it about the courses that really captured your interest? You mentioned you had one of the best-known maritime law professors in the country, and that you really enjoyed the course. What was it about the study, more than other aspects of the law, that you really found compelling?
Yeah, that's a good question, and I guess I would answer it this way, John. Imagine studying a 300-page contract with tiny letters and all sorts of clauses that are impossible even for a lawyer to read. I mean, you want to talk about putting you to sleep pretty early.
Yeah.
Then contrast that with being able to represent, like I've been fortunate to represent, guys that work on ships in the Pacific Ocean or oil rigs in the North Sea or boats in the Gulf of Mexico or people that have been kidnapped by pirates.
Yeah.
And being able to see the way that these ships, the way that these rigs operate, the way that they try to deal with safety issues. I mean, it's just a really fascinating area of law. It's never boring. And by and large, the people, the men and women that I represent, are really good people. They're hard workers. Most of them probably don't have advanced degrees, but they work hard and they make good money. And they generally are doing the right thing when they get hurt. You know, it's the difference between reading a 300-page contract and being involved in a case where there's pirates, or being involved in a case involving a helicopter crash in the Gulf of Mexico where the ships had to get out there and pull guys from the water who had spent hours and hours floating in the Gulf of Mexico and treading water. It's just a real big difference, and I really enjoy it.
I'm sure it's not as romantic as it sounds, but it's the stuff of movies.
You know, it is. I recently got involved in a case that was all over the news for the past few months. The Maersk, Alabama, an American ship, was going through pirate-infested waters off the coast of Somalia and was attacked by Somalian pirates. Ship had absolutely no security at all. And about 20 of these seamen were taken hostage by the pirates. Then the U.S. Navy came in and were able to free the sailors on this ship. Well, that's already been on the Discovery Channel. It's been on A&E, and now they're talking about making a movie out of it. So,
sure, yeah.
You know, it really can be kind of the stuff of movies, and that's pretty neat to be able to do that.
And I want to talk to you a little bit about what you're doing for those folks that were involved in that kidnapping by pirates, if you can do that. But I'm looking at the clock, and we need to take a quick break, but we'll be right back after this.
You're listening to On the Air with John Melley.
Well, welcome back. My guest today is Brian Beckcom, an attorney specializing in maritime law, and we've been discussing the interesting types of cases that Brian works with. And Brian, just before the break, we started to discuss how you've been representing people who were kidnapped by pirates off, was it the coast of Somalia?
Off the coast of Somalia, that's right, John.
Yeah. Can you talk to us a little bit more about that and what you're doing for those folks?
Yeah, the kidnapping has been all over the news. I mean, you can go on the internet and find all the information you want to find out about it. But basically what it looks like has been happening is the shipping companies, even though they know that these waters are infested by pirates, have made a very calculated decision not to provide security. And, you know, it's interesting, John, when we first started representing these Somalian workers, one of the excuses that the shipping company was using about not providing security is that it would be dangerous to have firearms on these vessels, that they couldn't do that.
Okay.
And 2 weeks ago, the same ship, the Maersk, Alabama, was attacked by pirates a second time.
Yeah.
Only this time, they had security on the vessel, including security with firearms, and as soon as the pirates found that out, they were gone. So the notion that you can't provide some basic level of security when you're going into a place that you know is dangerous turns out to be kind of silly. You asked me what we're doing for these sailors. What I would tell you is we're doing for these sailors what we try to do for all of our maritime clients. The first thing we try to do, because we represent sailors that are injured or families of sailors that have been killed, if it's an injury case, well, a lot of times what will happen is the company will try to send the injured worker to one of their doctors. And inevitably, that doctor will say, you're not hurt, or you're not hurt as bad as you think you are.
Yeah.
get back to work. And they know when they're hurt and when they're not. And they know when a doctor is not telling them the truth. They know when the doctor is telling them what the company wants them to tell them. So what happens a lot of times is my clients are not getting independent medical advice. So one of the first things we try to do is we try to help facilitate our clients to get independent medical advice from doctors that don't have any connection to the company or don't have any incentive to say what the insurance companies want them to say. Our view is that if you're hurt, the number one priority ought to be getting proper medical care.
Right. So you're looking for impartial doctor review.
You're looking for a doctor with no connection to the company.
Okay.
That's number one. Now, under maritime law, in most cases, the company is supposed to pay for medical treatment until the worker is better, until the worker's what we call at maximum medical improvement. Well, I would estimate, at least the cases that I get, that about 20% of the companies actually do that. Most of the companies will not pay for medical care, or they will fight paying for medical care if you're not seeing one of their doctors. So what we do, in addition to trying to facilitate appointments and reviews with independent doctors, and incidentally, all of the doctors that we facilitate with our clients are all board certified. These are all good doctors, and we want our clients to see good doctors. But we'll also help them make financial arrangements, not only so they can get the appointment, but so the doctor will actually see them.
Okay.
And then the other thing that we do for our clients is I've got a book that I wrote. It's not a long book. It's only 55 pages long.
Right.
And it's not a lawyer book. It's not written in complicated language. It's written specifically for injured workers and their families. I don't give it to the insurance companies. I don't give it to the companies. I give it to injured workers and their families only, and I give it to them for free. And what the book does is it kind of spells out in pretty good detail the tricks and the traps that the companies will use to try to hurt or potentially eliminate the workers' legal claims.
Right.
My view is that more information is better.
Right. You had sent some information over to me prior to our interview, and you did mention that you had written a book. Why did you write the book, Brian? What motivated you to do that?
John, the reason I wrote the book is really simple. I was frustrated. I have represented hundreds, if not thousands, of injured workers, and I kept seeing the companies and the insurance agent for the companies using the same tricks again and again. And I kept seeing my clients fall for the same tricks again and again. And I'd get the case, the client would call me, and a lot of times the insurance company had already tricked the client in some way and hurt their case. So my idea was I would write a book and I would put it on the internet. If you qualify as a maritime worker, you can get it for free. My thought is I would give out free information to the maritime workers that would help them protect themselves from these tricks. Okay. Let me give you an example.
Well, you know what I want to do? I want to come back to that. We have to take another quick break. We are definitely going to find out what some of these tricks are in just a minute.
Okay.
This is On the Air with John Melley.
Are you a maritime worker that's been injured on the job? The insurance companies use special tactics to keep you from getting the settlement and health care you deserve. Maritime law is a special type of law. Don't trust your maritime case to just any attorney. Hire an attorney that specializes in maritime law. Get a free copy of The Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case, written by maritime lawyer Brian Beckcom. Download your free copy of The Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case at themaritimelawyer.com. That's themaritimelawyer.com.
You're listening to On the Air with John Melley.
Welcome back. My guest today is Brian Beckcom, an attorney specializing in maritime law, and we've been discussing the special issues that surround maritime workers and legal aspects and how they can get injured on the job. And Brian, just before the break, you started to talk about some of the tricks that some of the companies use to disqualify the workers from proper medical treatment and any kind of financial settlement. Is that correct?
That's right, John.
Okay. What are some of these tricks that you see happening over and over and over again? And you cover these tricks in this book that you've written. What's the title of the book?
The book is called The Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case. And the reason I chose that title is because I've represented so many injured maritime workers that, in a way, I'm kind of an insider. I kind of know the tricks that these companies use again and again. And so my thought was I would give maritime workers an insider's view of what these tricks are and what you can do to avoid falling for these tricks and actually win your case. So that's the title of the book.
Right. So what are some of these tricks? You were going to give us an example before the break.
There's a whole bag of tricks, and I would encourage anybody listening who's interested to get the book, because there's no way in this interview that I can go over all of them. But let me give you some examples of some real common tricks.
Yeah.
One of the things that I see a lot, John, is an injured worker is hurt, and immediately that day or the next couple days they start getting calls from the company about giving a recorded statement.
Okay.
Now, what happens is the company will hire somebody, normally an insurance employee, whose professional training is to take recorded statements. These people go to school, they go to classes, they learn how to take statements, but it's not a statement aimed necessarily at getting the truth or the facts. The real aim of these recorded statements is to get a recording from the injured person saying something that hurts their case. A lot of times, these insurance agents and these investigators that take these statements are so good at asking the questions a certain way, and the person is injured and probably not in a position to really give a good recorded statement anyway,
right,
that the injured person will say something that hurts their case and they don't even know it.
Like what? What can they say?
Well, for instance, one of the things that these insurance adjusters or these investigators will ask is they'll say, tell me what happened. Normally, I don't let my clients give recorded statements once they're represented by me. So this has happened before they've hired me. But the client, without a lawyer, will describe the accident. Right. And then the insurance adjuster or the investigator will go through a checklist of things that are based on various legal issues. Well, this didn't happen, that didn't happen, this didn't happen, that didn't happen. Mm-hmm. And see, what they're trying to do there, John, is they're trying to eliminate any potential for the worker to actually win their case. Good example. Let's say it's a case where there was no handrails, nothing for the worker to hold on to, and they're going down a flight of steps and there's a bunch of grease and oil on the handrail. Well, if the worker fell and injured their back and maybe hit their head, they might not remember 2 days after the accident whether there were handrails or not.
Okay.
They may not remember 2 days after the accident whether there was grease or oil or not. The insurance adjuster or the investigator will try to get them to say, there was nothing wrong with the ship, I didn't see anything, even if they don't remember for sure. They're real clever about the way they do this.
Okay.
So I've actually got these websites that I manage, and I provide a lot of this information on my websites. When you're hurt in a maritime situation, you must, unless you're physically unable, you must report it. You must follow the company accident reporting procedures as best you can. I'm not saying don't report it, and I'm not saying don't follow the accident procedures.
Right.
But there is no obligation to give a recorded statement to anybody for any reason. And I strongly, strongly encourage injured workers not to give recorded statements to investigators for the company, because the only purpose of those statements is to hurt their case.
Yeah, they're going to use that and say to whomever's judging the case, to say, well, look, he said here or she said here that they don't remember, so it wasn't there, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Exactly.
Now, let me ask you a question. Is there an opportunity for you as an attorney representing this worker later on? Perhaps they've already given a recorded statement. Is there a way that you can kind of go before the judge or the mediator or whomever and say, look, this is the same old thing that gets pulled out and trotted out every time this thing happens with this company, and we all know that this is something that they do. Are there ways that you can disqualify that recording?
Yeah, there are ways to do that, but the point is, particularly with this example, is it's just more difficult. It makes the case more difficult to handle.
Okay.
And there is no obligation of any kind under any law, at least any law that I've ever heard of, for an injured person to give a recorded statement without talking to a lawyer first.
Okay.
So if you don't have to do it, and the only reason you're being asked to do it is to hurt your case, then you probably shouldn't do it. Let me give you another example of something that I see fairly frequently.
Yes, please do.
Yeah. I represented a young man, 28 years old, who was working on an offshore oil rig, and one of his coworkers had failed to put the grating on one of the walkways back in place in an area of the rig that's very dark. It's basically the basement of the rig.
Okay.
Well, the worker was walking down there. He fell through a hole, and he was injured severely.
Yeah.
Clear negligence on behalf of the company. No question about the negligence. The worker went to the company doctor that day. Company doctor said, nothing wrong with you, go back to work. Literally the same day. Well, it turns out later, after he got some independent legal advice, that he had a very serious spinal injury to his neck that could have resulted in paralysis if it hadn't been corrected. But anyway, the worker my client tried to go back to do what they call light duty. And anybody that's worked offshore in the maritime industry knows there's really no such thing as light duty.
I can't imagine. Yeah.
But the company said, hey, come back to work and we'll give you light duty. Well, my client, being the hard worker that he was, said, okay, I'll come back to light duty. So he goes back, reports to the company, and the day he shows up, they say, our light duty program is terminated.
Oh, geez.
Nothing for you to do. Now, see, what the companies try to do is when you're hurt and you see a company doctor and the company doctor orders you back to work, even if they put some restrictions on how much you can lift and what you can do, the company will say, well, you can do light duty. Well, most people, after they've seen a company doctor, if they're really hurt, aren't in a position to do maritime work at all. But the company will say, well, we offered you light duty and you didn't take it, and they'll try to make you look like a malingerer.
Okay.
So this is another trick or trap that the companies use. I call it the phantom light duty trap. And basically the idea is we'll pretend like we have light duty offshore, and then when the worker doesn't take us up on that, we'll say that he's a malingerer or he's a faker. And there are all sorts of tricks like this that I could tell you about, but I'll tell you the reaction in my book, John.
Yeah.
It's really funny because, and I don't mean funny in a comedic way, but funny in kind of an ironic way, because
Sure.
I have people contact me all the time about representing them in maritime cases. And I'll say, well, why don't you read my book? It's real short. And they'll read the book and they'll call me up the next day and they'll say, you told me X, Y, and Z would happen in the book, and that's exactly what's happened to me already.
Yeah.
I mean, they use the same techniques and the same tricks over and over and over. And it like I said, I wrote the book because I was frustrated because I got sick of seeing my sailors and my oil rig workers and my crew boat members. I just got sick of seeing them taken advantage of, frankly.
Sure. I want to talk to you a little bit more about, we've probably covered a couple of mistakes that you see injured maritime workers make, but we'd need to take another quick break. But when we come back, I want to talk to you about some of the other mistakes you might see them make.
Great.
You're listening to On the Air with John Melley.
Welcome back. My guest today is Brian Beckcom, an attorney specializing in maritime law, and we've been discussing injured maritime workers. And Brian, just before the break, you were talking about some of the tricks that companies regularly use on injured workers, and we were also starting to talk about some of the mistakes that you see injured maritime workers make on a regular basis. I was wondering if you could elaborate a little bit more on that.
Yeah. Probably the number one mistake I see, John, is falling for the tricks that I list in my book. But beyond that, If you're hurt offshore, it is very, very important that you get appropriate medical advice and that you follow your doctor's orders. Here's why. And it's a fine line. It's been my experience that most maritime workers have a I'm going to tough it out type of attitude.
Yeah, I mean, they're the kind of person that's out there working. I mean, you're not going to get somebody who's kind of a wimp out on an oil rig.
Exactly. Exactly. And so and I think in general, it's a good thing to have a tough it out attitude.
Sure.
But, if you're hurt, it's like my wife tells me. My wife will go to the doctor if she sneezes more than once. I've got to basically be on my deathbed to go to the doctor.
Right. Yeah.
Men and women, a lot of times, and I don't want to generalize too much, but they're just different about those sorts of things.
Yep.
Offshore workers are different about toughing it out. And it's a good thing in general, but the problem that happens sometimes, and the mistake that these workers will make when they're involved in a legal claim, is the doctors will give them instruction to do physical therapy or to get x-rays or to do all sorts of different things medically. And the worker will miss appointments, or they'll try to tough it out. They'll tell the doctor, hey, I'm okay, I can do it. I don't need all this stuff. And again, that's a good general approach to life, I think, but it is not helpful if you're legitimately hurt for your case, because, see, the defendant, the companies, the insurance companies, they'll use all that against you. They won't say, well, this worker is a tough person and that's a good. They'll make it sound like a bad thing. They'll say, well, he or she, they must not really be hurt.
Uh-huh.
So one of the mistakes that I see a lot is workers that are hurt going overboard trying to tough it out. I mean, you need to make sure your doctors know everything that's going on with you, and you need to follow your doctor's advice. It's just kind of that simple. I'll tell you the other thing that I find from time to time, and this is probably the worst mistake you can make.
Okay.
If you're involved in a claim, is not telling your lawyer the truth. And that doesn't mean that my clients just flat out lie to me. But sometimes clients they'll have been involved in an accident 10 years before, gone to the doctor for 2 weeks and then felt better and gone back to work. And they'll forget to tell me about that because they don't think it's important.
Right.
Well, if the company finds out about that and my client has not told the company about that during the lawsuit or forgot to testify about that, the company will make that look like they're a big liar. So probably the best thing, and I think this advice goes not just for maritime workers, but for any clients involved in any kind of case, and people generally, it's real important to tell the truth.
Sure.
Not only because it's the right thing to do, but specifically with respect to a legal claim, it'll really, really hurt your case if you get caught in a lie.
Or anything that might come across or be perceived as a lie.
Yeah, that's a good point, John. Anything that the insurance company can twist to make it look like a lie, they will. There's no such thing in the insurance company world as a mistake or I forgot. They don't operate that way.
Brian, obviously to a lot of folks, this area of law practice is unique. But what makes your service unique amongst all other maritime attorneys?
Well, first of all, John, I think it's fair to say that 98% of lawyers, maybe more than that, probably more than that, will never handle a maritime injury case in their career. So we are one of the few firms that actually handles maritime injury and wrongful death cases. That's one thing that makes us different. A couple other things that make us different, at least from some firms, probably most firms, is we don't have 10 or 15 lawyers, and if you hire me to represent you in a case, then you get to talk to me. You don't have to deal with a two-year associate. You don't have to deal with a paralegal. Now, I do have a couple lawyers that work with me on cases, but I handle your case from start to finish. And there are other firms where they're bigger firms, but you'll never get to talk to the actual lawyer that runs the firm. You'll be dealing with lower-level people the entire time. So you get personal attention from me or my law partner. Both of us are board certified. And so that's another thing. The two other things I think that really differentiate us from other maritime law firms in particular is, number one, we have a monthly newsletter that we send out to all our clients that's got all sorts of interesting, cool information. It's not one of these boring, canned, put you to sleep at night newsletters. We provide a real valuable service to our client with this newsletter. We get compliments all the time. We get clients say, hey, my friend picked this up and they want to get on your list.
Right.
So that's a service that not many law firms that I'm aware of provide.
Like what do you put in it, Brian?
Well, that's a good question. One of the things we try to do is we try to let people know about safety issues. See, we get to see, as personal injury lawyers, a lot of accidents that were tragic and preventable.
Okay.
And because we get to see that a lot, we see a lot of safety issues. And so we try to make everybody that read our newsletter aware of as many safety issues as we can. So hopefully our clients can avoid getting into the problems that we see other people get into too much.
Okay.
I write the lead article every month, and one of the things I try to do in the lead article is just give people food for thought, things to think about, motivational books to read, and just stuff that you normally probably wouldn't hear from most lawyers.
Right.
And then the last thing we do is right now we've got 4 websites, and those websites are packed with information, and it's all for free. You go on the website, and you can research a lot of issues in your case without ever picking up the phone and talking to a lawyer. We provide that for free whether you hire us or not.
Okay.
And in my experience, most lawyers want you to sign papers. They want you to hire them. They're not going to provide you a lot of information, and most of them won't provide you any time at all and actually answering questions unless you've signed their papers and hired them. Our attitude about that is completely the opposite. I would rather somebody be informed and hire a different lawyer, a good lawyer, than hire us than somebody get tricked by the company. You know, you can go to all our different websites and you can see, I think, the difference between the websites that we run, which are information-based, and the information or the websites that other law firms put up, which most law firm websites basically say something like, we're aggressive, we're great. They talk about themselves.
400 years of experience.
400 years of experience. Now, what they're not telling you is that what that means is they've got 40 lawyers with 5 years of experience.
Right, yeah, right. Yeah.
That's the key phrase there, is combined.
Oh, right.
Yeah. So that's a little trick that they use. But, you know, and I'll tell you the other interesting thing now that we're talking about websites and lawyer advertising is there is, I don't know how to say this diplomatically, let me just give you some concrete examples of some things that I've seen happen that bothered me. I had a client, a boat captain I represented 2 or 3 years ago, and he had hired a lawyer that had never done a maritime case before.
Right.
And that lawyer ended up getting his boat captain sued by the company that caused his injuries. There's a way in maritime law, if you don't know what you're doing, where the injured worker can actually get sued.
Oh, jeez.
And it's a real mess when that happens. Well, the lawyer fortunately realized before it was too late that he needed some help, so he called me up. I talked to the boat captain, terrific guy, and agreed to represent him. But it was a real mess trying to fix that problem. We ended up fixing the problem and getting him a good settlement. There is no rules. This may really surprise some of your listeners, John. You can advertise as a lawyer for maritime cases even if you've never handled a maritime case in your whole life.
Oh, my gosh.
And there's some websites out there, I'm not going to say who,
Sure.
but there's some websites out there that really make it look like these lawyers handle a lot of maritime cases, and I know they don't because I know who they are, and they wouldn't know how to handle a maritime case most likely, even the simplest maritime case. So people need to be really careful. You know, lawyers, when they advertise, they're not allowed to lie about their experience.
Right.
In other words, they can't say, I've handled 200 maritime cases when they've never handled one.
Right.
But they are allowed to say, we accept maritime cases, even if they've never handled one before.
Sure.
And I've got, on my website, I've got a list of questions that people can ask lawyers. This is also in my book, to determine whether that's really the right lawyer whether that lawyer really knows what they're doing or not. And if you ask a lawyer point blank, how many maritime cases have you handled, he can't lie to you about it. He's required to tell you the truth. That's just one good question. Are you board certified? That's another good question. Now, that doesn't mean a non-board certified lawyer doesn't know what they're doing, but some people want board certified lawyers.
Sure. Brian, I'm looking at the clock. I do need to take another quick break, but when we come back, maybe we could talk about some other ways to find the best maritime lawyer when we come back.
This is On the Air with John Melley.
Are you a maritime worker that's been injured on the job? The insurance companies use special tactics to keep you from getting the settlement and health care you deserve. Maritime law is a special type of law. Don't trust your maritime case to just any attorney. Hire an attorney that specializes in maritime law. Get a free copy of The Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case, written by maritime lawyer Brian Beckcom. Download your free copy of The Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case at themaritimelawyer.com. That's themaritimelawyer.com.
You're listening to On the Air with John Melley.
Well, welcome back. My guest today is Brian Beckcom, an attorney specializing in maritime law, and we've been discussing how to go about finding a maritime lawyer. And Brian, just before the break, you were talking about how some lawyers say they accept maritime cases. How do I say this nicely? They accept maritime cases without really having a lot of experience, and that these people who need a lawyer experienced in maritime cases can actually wind up getting in a little bit of trouble by doing that. Am I correct in that?
Yeah, the way I would put that, I think you put it well, John. There are lawyers who advertise for maritime cases who haven't handled any or haven't handled many.
Okay.
And one of the things that I do in my book and also on the website is I try to give people some input, questions to ask that'll help them identify whether the lawyer they're talking to or interviewing actually knows what he or she is talking about.
Right.
For instance, how many maritime cases have you handled? That's a real straightforward question. The lawyer's supposed to tell you the truth. Are you board certified in any area of law? That's a yes or no answer, and it's a real straightforward question.
What does that mean, Brian, being board
certification means that you have met the requirements of, in the state of Texas at least, the Texas Board of Legal Specialization. And in order to meet those requirements, you have to have gone to court and tried a certain number of cases to verdict as the lead lawyer. You've had to have enough experience taking depositions, going to court, doing hearings, and you have to pass a full-day test in that area of law.
Oh, wow.
I think the last time I saw the statistics that there were less than 5% of lawyers in Texas were board certified.
Okay.
You know, for example, my certification is in personal injury trial law. And what that means is I've actually gone to court as the lead counsel representing clients in enough cases to meet the requirements. I've passed the test, and I've taken thousands of depositions. And so I'm board certified. And what people don't realize, because I think, or a lot of people don't realize, is because on TV the image of lawyers is you're down in court arguing all the time.
Right.
Well, very few lawyers nowadays, particularly in my field, actually go to court to trial in front of a jury on cases. So it's hard to find lawyers that actually have experience doing that. Why is it important, in my view, to have that kind of experience? Well, the companies know which lawyers are willing to go the distance and which aren't.
Okay.
And if the company knows, hey, this is Mr. Beckcom, this is Beckcom's firm, he's board certified, he's been to trial, if we don't offer a reasonable settlement, we will have to go to trial. Typically, they'll offer a more reasonable settlement than if it's a lawyer where they say, we don't know who this lawyer is, he's never been to court, or he hadn't been to court in 20 years, we know he's not going to go to trial, then they're going to not offer as much money. That's typically our experience.
Okay.
So board certification, that doesn't mean if you're not board certified, you're not a good lawyer, but it's just one piece of information that's helpful.
Okay.
And, the list of questions on my website and the list of questions on my book, one of the things I tried to do, John, is I tried to have questions that have real black and white answers. And the reason I did that is because if you're interviewing a lawyer and you ask them a yes or no question, like, are you board certified?
Yep.
And they don't give you a yes or no answer,
Okay.
then you need to be kind of cautious in my view.
Okay.
So, that's another thing I mentioned in my book, and I tell a lot of clients will call me, and they've talked to a couple lawyers, and they call me to talk to me and find out, what I know and what I do. I encourage people to talk to more than one lawyer. I think it's a good idea to do that. I mean, hiring a lawyer, if you got a serious injury,
Yeah.
or if a family member has died, is a real important decision.
Yeah, I can see obviously where it would have huge implications.
It can have huge implications, and so I think it's a really good idea to talk to more than one lawyer.
Okay.
Because you need to know what's out there, and people are looking for the best lawyer. There really is no such thing as the best lawyer. What there is, though, I think, is there's the best lawyer for your case. And the way you find the best lawyer for your case, in my opinion, is you find somebody, number one, who's got the experience, got the track record, and number two, somebody that you trust and you're comfortable with, because you're going to be typically involved with your lawyer in some pretty personal matters for a year or more. And so you want somebody you trust and that you can work with.
Sure. Yeah, you don't want to feel like, ugh, got to talk to my lawyer again.
Right, exactly.
You want to go, I got to talk to my lawyer again.
All right. I can't wait.
Listen, speaking of which, I think we might have a couple of phone calls. Do you want to take a couple?
Love to.
Sure. Hi, who's this?
Tim?
Hi, Tim. How are you today? Thanks for calling.
Oh, not a problem at all. How you doing today?
Very well, thanks. So listen, you're a client of Brian Beckham's. I was just wondering how you met Brian.
I met Brian after I found him on the internet, looking up for people that handle that type of law.
Describe your overall experience working with Brian.
It was very good. It went the way it should. It was the first and hopefully the last time I ever had to deal with a situation like that. But, he handled it very well and did everything he said he was going to do.
Was the final settlement what you expected it to be?
I didn't know what to expect, honestly. I just wanted to get better. And we did do that. They help you out where you're not stressed out and worried. I mean, you're still stressed out because, a lot of cases when you're in a situation like this, you got to be, or you can't work, you're hurt, you need someone to help you. And he stepped in there and he did everything that he could and that made you feel more secure. It takes a little bit of the weight of the burden off of you. Did everything in his power to, make sure that you got better and that you were, compensated, get back to where you needed to be. And he went above and beyond to get that done.
Terrific. So, Brian, what did you do for this gentleman?
Well, one of my favorite clients that I've ever had, Tim, was hurt on a boat offshore, and the company literally went through the checklist of tricks to try to prevent him from recovering anything on his case. I mean, they didn't get him to a company doctor. They blamed the accident on him. They tried to take a recorded statement. They wouldn't pay for his medical bills. They hired the worst of the worst company doctors to say there was nothing wrong with him. They fought the case till the bitter end, and Tim stuck it out, and it was financially pretty tough for a year while the case was going on. But at the end of the day, we got Tim a pretty big settlement. It's confidential. I can't talk about it.
Sure.
But let's just say that the company, they paid him a lot more than they otherwise would have.
Okay, fair enough. Let's take another call. Hi, who's this?
This is Jackie Robinson.
Hi, Jackie. How are you today?
All right, how you doing?
Great, thanks for calling. So how did you come to know Brian Beckham and his firm?
Okay, well, I go to a barbershop and just kind of hearing guys talk. I had an accident on my job, and I was having a hard time getting somebody to help me with my case. Didn't nobody want to take my case and my medicine and get my medicine for me and get me in therapy. And so he told me about a guy that knew Brian. So I met the other guy, and he told me about the other guy, and that's the way I met Brian.
Okay. And so can you tell us a little bit about what happened to you?
Yeah, I was working offshore. I was a cook. It was about 90 degrees on the outside, and our air conditioner had went off in the inside, and it was about 109 degrees in there, and I kept telling them about it, and they didn't do anything about it. And so sooner or later, I just kind of passed out.
Oh, wow.
And that's how my accident happened. And then they kept me, after I passed out, kept me out on the rig about 7 hours. Then finally, a helicopter came, got me, and took me to Lafayette General, where I stayed about 3.5 days. And then after I got out, my company tried to get me to come back to work, but I told them I was hurting too bad, and they were telling me that I could come and work in the office and all this kind of stuff and answer phones and things. And I told them, well, I don't have any clerical skills. The only thing I know how to do is, labor work and cook and stuff like that. So they kept harassing me, and I was telling them that I needed to go to the doctor, and they wouldn't pay for me to go to the doctor. So when I got with this other guy, and he told me about Brian, and I went and talked to Brian, and immediately I knew that I had someone that had some power that could do something for me. So, I didn't even, after I talked to him about 10 minutes, I didn't have no problem signing with him and doing everything he wanted me to do. And he got my doctors together. He got me in therapy. Anything that I needed, Brian was there for me.
What was it about your conversation that you said, I know this is the guy?
Well, he was telling me about, there's a lot of companies out there that will feed you a lot of bull and say what they're going to do this, they're going to do that. And, and then he was telling me about, it's going to take, he didn't lie to me, told me it's going to take, a while, to do what he need done. And I just have to be patient. And anything I needed, I could come and talk to him, and he probably can assist me with that. And when he said anything that I needed, because I was really down at the time, my bills were behind, I lost my car, me and my wife was almost getting a divorce and everything. And Brian, he's just like a brother to me, because he helped me more than anybody ever helped me in my life.
Wow.
Yeah, that's a friend I want to keep forever, and not just on a lawyer basis, but just a personal friend, because he's someone that I can call even after that and say, hey, well, this is going on with me, or that's going on with me. What can I do about that? And he always finds out a way to tell me what to do to resolve my problem, and even though I'm not a client of his now.
So I take it you're pretty happy with the settlement he was able to get for you?
Oh, yes, I was. Yeah, really happy.
Well, Jackie, thank you so much for calling. We really appreciate that. Brian, he sounds thrilled with what you were able to do for him, and frankly, he sounds like he's very fond of you as a person as well. Why don't you give everybody the name of your book again and how they can get a copy of it?
Yeah, the book is called The Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case. We have a website called www.jonesactbook.com. That's JONES book.com. The Jones Act, John, just so your listeners know, is one of the federal laws that protects maritime workers.
Okay.
They can also go to my firm's main website, which is www.vbattorneys.com. That's V as in Victor, B as in Brian, attorneys.com. The book is available there. And they can get it. We have what's called a blog, which is just a website with a bunch of information on it.
Yeah.
The book's available there, and that address is www.themaritimelawyer.com, THE maritimelawyer.com.
And maritime is MARITIME.
That's right.
Okay, very good. Brian, thank you very much. Before we depart, I have one last question that I want to ask you. And this is a question that I ask all my guests. In preparation for today's interview, you probably had some sort of mental dialogue about what you were going to talk about. And I've found frequently that that's the core message that my guests want to make sure that, above all things, that this is the one point that they want to make sure that they get across. I was wondering if you had that kind of thought, and if so, what that thought is.
Yeah. Information is power, and if you are hurt or you have a family member that's killed and you think there was negligence involved, get as much information as you can. If it's in a maritime situation, I would highly recommend you look at my book. I'd highly recommend you look on the web. There's all sorts of information out there. Don't trust the insurance companies or the companies that were negligent and caused the thing to begin with. Arm yourself with information.
Okay, very good. One last time on the title of the book and how they can get in touch with you.
Insider's Guide to Winning Your Maritime Injury Case. You can get that at www.thejonesactbook.com or www.themaritimelawyer.com. You can also call my office toll-free.
Okay.
and we'll send it to you. That phone number is 877-724-7800. Or you can send me an email. My email address is Brian with an I at vbattorneys.com. That's Brian, B-R-I-A-N, at vbattorneys.com.
Repeat that phone number one more time, please, Brian.
Sure, 877-724-7800.
That's terrific. Brian, I just want to thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to share this fascinating information with us. I'm sure that if there are workers out there that are in need, or even if they haven't been injured, that this would be good information for them to have just in case. So if anybody's out there listening to the program, check out the information that Brian's made available to you. I think it'd be well worth your time to do so. Brian, thank you so much for being on the program.
Thanks, John. I really enjoyed it.
Terrific. Be well.
You've been listening to On the Air with John Melley. For more information on this program, please refer to the contact information that accompanied this audio CD.